Y'all, I can't even believe it. Let's cue the confetti because it's the 100th episode of Homeschool Conversations. Thank you to listeners old and new who have made this adventure possible. Well, okay, it's actually only sorta kinda with the 100th episode, but if being a homeschool graduate and homeschool mom has taught me anything, it's that I can step outside the box and forge my own path anytime I want. Okay, silliness aside, maybe you're looking at your podcast queue and thinking to yourself, but Amy, I see over 150 episodes. How is this your 100th episode? Why, I'm so glad you asked. From the beginning, I have always had episodes that I've called my regular season episodes. But then someone would publish a new book, or I'd have a fun idea for an extra episode, and I'd just sort of fit it in between regularly scheduled programs. And I got in the habit of calling these bonus episodes. I've also had special series like a summer audio blog series and an Advent series with guest podcast hosts. All things considered, it adds up to 150 pretty quickly. So I decided that I wanted to throw myself a podcast party, but it was getting too complicated to try to decide which episodes counted. So this episode that you're listening to right now is the official 100th regular season episode, which just means that you always get more than you pay for when it comes to content around here. I am super excited about today's episode. I've pulled together clips from the top episodes since season 1. I'm sharing some behind-the-scenes details, and there may even be a giveaway for a lucky, loyal listener. So stick around for this very special episode of Homeschool Conversations with Humility and Doxology. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Homeschool Conversations with Humility and Doxology, a series of interviews with real-life homeschool moms, dads, and other educators on all sorts of topics that affect our lives as homeschool parents. I'm Amy Sloan, a second-generation homeschool mom of 5, and I am so delighted that you are here. Here on Homeschool Conversations, we'll discuss educational philosophy, family life, and more. Come chat with us. First, it's time for a little backstory. Can any of you remember your first podcast? I started listening to podcasts way back in 2010 or 2011. I'm pretty sure the very first podcasts I listened to were the Joy the Baker podcast, The Art of Simple, and The Home Hour. This was way before I had a smartphone. I would download the episodes to my computer, then transfer them to my tiny little MP3 player. As an extroverted stay-at-home mom with lots of littles, podcasts brought conversation and laughter and learning straight to my earbuds, livening times folding laundry, carrying me through long runs, and keeping me occupied while driving around running errands. Perhaps it was a carryover from my childhood years growing up on talk radio, but I had a dream that maybe, just maybe, one day I'd get to host my own podcast. Fast forward to February 2020. The rest of the world was poised for a crisis, but I was just jumping headfirst into a different kind of crazy idea. Back then, I couldn't figure out a free way to host a podcast, but I did have a Facebook page and YouTube channel for my website, humilityanddoxology.com. My friend Matt Miner had done an interview on a podcast all about financial planning, and I thought to myself, my homeschool audience would love to hear Matt's advice about finances. Matt's a homeschool dad and would have good things to say. So I asked Matt, and he graciously agreed to join me for a video chat. Now, this particular episode is actually not in the Homeschool Conversations podcast feed, which I had kind of forgotten until I was preparing for this show. The video is available on YouTube. And then I remembered, since I didn't have a podcast at the time, Matt actually published the audio on his own podcast. which has since been rebranded as the Work Pants Finance Podcast, and I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. When I published that video on Facebook and YouTube, I had no idea it was the first episode of Homeschool Conversations. But I had so much fun interviewing Matt that I decided to just start emailing people and asking them if they'd like to join me for a video chat. And for some reason, they kept saying yes. I was so excited, but also kept thinking to myself, but why would they say yes? Honestly, sometimes I'm still floored by the amazing people who have come onto this show to share their wisdom. But maybe none have meant as much to me, especially in those first months, as when my mentor, Dr. George Grant, agreed to come on for a chat.
We need to press into the ongoing process of conforming ourselves to the image of Christ and growing in wonder and delight at the world that he's placed around us and the calling that he's given to us. So education is not to stop at knowledge, it's to press on towards understanding, and then from understanding to wisdom.
At some point in there, I finally named the interview series Homeschool Conversations with Humility and Doxology, as it is today. And much later, I finally got an actual microphone. So if you go back to those early episodes and I sound a little terrible, I know, and I'm sorry. But it was still just a video interview series, not a podcast. And that's when my haircut changed everything. August 5th, 2020, I was getting a haircut when the owner of the salon told me that she had just started her own podcast. She told me about this thing called Anchor that was a totally free way to host episodes. I came home and started this podcast feed that very afternoon. By the end of August, I had formatted and uploaded all 30 of the old video interviews and turned them into audio podcast episodes. From then on, almost all Homeschool Conversations with Humility and Doxology episodes live here in the audio feed, as well as on blog posts at humilityanddoxology.com and as videos on the Humility and Doxology YouTube channel. We're now in the middle of season 7, and it has been absolutely epic and an actual dream come true. And you guys seem to be enjoying it as well. Here's a recent podcast review from Ronnie Dell on Apple Podcasts. Amazing podcast. I look forward to the time when I can sit down and listen to this podcast. Every time I listen, I get to evaluate how my homeschool is going, and I get to use helpful advice from this podcast to make my homeschool journey better with my kids. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you so much for this review, and I would love it if every one of you would take a moment to leave a podcast rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. It's not only such an encouragement to me, but it helps other homeschooling parents find Homeschool Conversations. The more reviews, the more likely the mysterious algorithm is to suggest the show to new listeners. So thank you for taking a moment to leave some stars. 5 would be great, and a note saying what you love about the show. Okay, y'all are probably getting tired of hearing just my voice on a show that is usually an interview format. I've got a treat prepared for you. I went through each season of the podcast and found the top most downloaded episode from each season. Then I checked the top 5 downloaded episodes of all time to see if any of those weren't in my list. Sure enough, 3 hadn't made the initial list. In fact, 3 out of the top 5 episodes of all time are from the same season. Also, just for funsies, I decided to figure out the most popular bonus episode, and we'll hear that clip at the end of this episode as, well, a bonus. All right, let's go back to season 1. The most popular episode from the first season of the podcast is Finding the Gospel in Fairy Tales with Angelina Stanford, which just might change the way you think about fairy tales.
The things that sort of make you cautious and uncomfortable about fairy tales are precisely why you need to read them. So in the modern age, we are materialists. In other words, our presumptions about reality is what is real is what we can touch, taste, see, right, hear, experience through the senses. That's all, that's what's real. Anything that's not experienced by the senses is not real. So now we've ended up in a situation where God, by this definition, is not real. Goodness, virtue, truth, beauty, goodness, these things don't exist because I cannot experience them with my senses. And so here we are in this emaciated age where we have just sucked the soul out of reality by redefining reality as what can be experienced in the senses. Our steady diet of realistic literature and realistic movies means that we are over and over and over subjecting ourselves to the lie that the only thing is real is what I can see. Now, as a Christian, we know that's a lie, right? We're constantly battling that lie. We're constantly saying, no, 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 no. This is my momentary light affliction, right? This is not what's real. And we're constantly saying, no, 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 no. God exists. You just can't experience him through the senses, right? We're constantly saying, no, there is a reality that is in fact the greater reality that transcends our senses, right? So what fairy tales do is they reintroduce wonder and mystery into our lives.
The top episode in season 2, no surprise, was my conversation with Charlotte Mason educator Karen Glass. I titled it Patience, Wonder, Ignorance, and Joy in a Classical Charlotte Mason Education. Yeah, so maybe I have trouble coming up with short and snappy titles, but our chat was filled with so much goodness that it's one people are still returning to today.
And so I think a new homeschool mom, needs to be patient with themselves. That it doesn't all have to be done this year. Every week doesn't have to be, you don't have to check every box every week. There is no behind because you're not racing anybody else. You're just educating your own children. And in the same way, Charlotte Mason always makes the analogy of education and learning and connects it to food and feeding. And in the same way that you manage to keep your children fed, maybe this week they ate a lot of peanut butter jelly sandwiches, but nobody's dying of starvation, you will be able to keep teaching them, their academics as well. You're going to be feeding their hearts and souls with the books that you read and the songs that you sing and the art that you look at, and they will grow and they will not intellectually die of starvation. And it's the natural thing that if you feed them, they will grow.
What if I told you that there was a way to incorporate freedom into your homeschool planning? A way to blend flexibility and a well-ordered day. Homeschool planning doesn't have to be scary. I have created a free homeschool planning guide to help you ask the right big picture questions to set your long-term homeschool goals, and it will also give you 7 simple steps to craft a peaceful, orderly homeschool plan. If you want access to this free ebook, just head to humilityanddoxology.com/homeschool-planning-guide or just click the link in the show notes. Another classical Charlotte Mason educator ended up as the most popular guest in season 3. My conversation with Adrienne Fries touched on topics like the trivium as curriculum and pedagogy, the role of picture study and nature study in developing contemplation, and the realities and challenges of homeschool motherhood.
When we're talking about grammar, we're not talking about grammar in identifying parts of speech. We're talking about it as a mode. So this is where you're learning to imitate something really well. And it's the foundation of habit training as well. So when this is happening in the mind, you're making discoveries, you're asking questions, you're wondering, and you're learning to imitate that which is good and true and beautiful. And so as a curriculum, the grammar mode happens when you're doing copy work, when you're doing anything beautiful for the sake of beauty, not just for the sake of regurgitating facts.
We're all looking for freedom and flexibility in our homeschooling, so it's no surprise that Emily Copeland's episode ended up at the top of the list for season 4. Her encouragement to underplan and over-deliver, her focus on relationships and the individual persons in our homes, and her experience overcoming the need to prove herself and moving into a place of homeschooling freedom was an encouragement to us all.
We had freedom, and it was time for us to take advantage of that freedom. We were probably about 3 or 4 years into it before I started gradually shifting to what I felt led to the whole time. I would just say, ultimately, you've got the roller coaster ride. You start, okay, I'm going to do it this way, but no, I'm coming down. I'm going to do it this way. And so we've just done our little roller coaster. It started off feeling like we needed to really prove ourselves. And then we've over time kind of come into these moments where we can just kind of relax and do what's right for us.
Season 5 was a barn burner of a season with 3 of my top episodes of all time. But coming out on top, not only in Season 5, but as the number 1 downloaded episode of all time, is my chat with Mariel Hosepian, a public school teacher and homeschooling mom, titled School versus Education.
Favorite parts of homeschooling. I love the independence. I don't want someone else telling me what to do. I don't want to meet with an educational facilitator to show her work samples once a month, the way that some homeschoolers have to do with charter schools. That was never appealing to me. The idea that I would have to meet with someone who possibly had less experience teaching than I had, so that they could then just check off boxes. I didn't like that idea. All of those don'ts influence the do's.
Last season, Season 6, your favorite episode was definitely my chat with Amber Smith called Keys to a Successful Homeschool Year. Amber Smith and I talked about the priority of relationships and family culture, the value of reading aloud and modeling lifelong learning, the importance of setting boundaries and expectations, and more.
You know what? I think I've just really enjoyed being with my kids. I think that has been the biggest blessing. I always say the number 1 value of homeschooling is the relationships that you build with your family. And if you're missing that, you're missing the main point.
So there you go. Those are the top episodes from each of the previous seasons of the podcast. Well, just a little clip. You'll have to go listen to the full episodes in your podcast app. But wait, there's more. When I checked the top 5 episodes of all time, I saw 3 episodes that were in the top 5 but weren't the top in their own seasons. First up, here's a clip from my spicy episode with Gina Muncy, Resisting the Homeschool Stereotypes.
So, we've heard these things before, right? Like maybe homeschooling can fix human nature. Maybe homeschooling can create kids who turn out exactly the way we want them to. That sells a lot of tickets to homeschool conferences, right? Maybe the answer lies in reading the right kinds of really old books, or wearing the right kinds of clothes, or listening to only a certain kind of music and using just this curriculum. This will produce Christians. Well, spoiler alert, right?
Right.
Amy, you and I have talked about this so many times before. There is no substitute for the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Also popular is my conversation with the modern Miss Mason, aka Leah Bowden.
I came across Charlotte Mason because I was looking for British influence. Like I loved everything that the American pioneers in homeschooling were teaching us, but it had to be culturally relevant, and I had to be able to apply it to my 21st century British family. So I came across Charlotte Mason. Generally, people are introduced to her through maybe nature study, maybe something more literature based. I just remember reading an article about possibilities for approaches for homeschooling, and it just struck my eye, and I started to go down that rabbit hole, and what a rabbit hole it is, and I never came back up, and I still haven't. Her insight into childhood and education, and then also what she has just transformed my approach to those things as well. And I remember just being, she did catch awe and wonder in childhood. She wanted to keep children young and in to be able to enjoy the beauty of childhood, but didn't ever diminish what they could achieve or think or take in and absorb. And I love that. I thought, yeah, let's celebrate childhood, but let's not dumb it down.
And last but not least, my conversation on life-giving motherhood with Min Wang.
I am so thankful. We have nothing to worry about. We have nothing to be anxious for, nothing to fret about, because everything is completed. On the cross, Jesus finished it. I have no more check boxes I need to check off. He checked them all off for me. And that liberates me, therefore, with joy to be able to now do what I see my Father doing.
Y'all, this is just a sample of all the goodness just waiting in your podcast feed to encourage your homeschool mama heart. I encourage you to scroll back down the feed and check out some of the older episodes. They make great accompaniment for summer road trips, long walks, or just a little bit of homeschool mom professional development time. Oh, and I promised you that bonus episode clip, but first, let me tell you about the giveaway I have going on this week in honor of the 100th episode. Head to humilityanddoxology.com/EP100. That's humilityanddoxology.com/EP100. One lucky winner will receive the book A Child's Introduction to Poetry by Michael Driscoll, one size large Real Goths Don't Wear Black, They Sack Rome t-shirt. You've probably seen that one several times in my Instagram feed. A $25 gift card to the Humility and Doxology shop, and a $50 gift card to the bookstore of your choice. That could be Amazon, Thrift Books, or your favorite local bookshop. Okay, one last clip for you. Although this is the 100th regular season episode, like I said at the beginning, there are a whole lot of bonus episodes in this podcast feed. Your top bonus episode download is probably not a surprise. It's my conversation with Sarah McKenzie.
Early on, I had a very deep longing to belong to a certain kind of homeschool group. So I wanted to be either classical or Charlotte Mason or Unschooly or something. I wanted my people. I wanted to know who I was and like where I fit in, which is very human, right? That we all want to belong. But I think in an effort to learn all I could about those homeschooling philosophies and methods, I sort of got wrapped up in this ideal version of what an ideal education could look like, instead of looking at the children God gave me right in front of me and being like, these are the children, these are the images of God that I am charged with bringing up. I sort of got like my eyes off the prize, sort of, and instead of focusing on my kids, I was idealizing, and we do this now, I think, differently than we did, 15 years ago, because now we do it by looking at Instagram or whatever, idealizing this perfect homeschool. Where do I want my dream homeschool to be? But really your dream homeschool is right in front of you with the kids God gave you.
I just want to say thank you again to each of you listeners and to each of my guests for being a part of this podcast community. It has been a true joy to chat with so many amazing homeschool moms, dads, and educators over the past few years. And by God's grace, I look forward to many more to come. I would love to hear from you, especially if any of these top episodes have surprised you or if your favorite got left off the list. You can always send me an email at amy@humilityanddoxology.com, or you can leave a podcast review and it just might be featured in a future podcast episode. And don't forget to join the amazing giveaway over in the show notes for this episode. Thanks for being here, friends. I'll talk to you soon. Before I go, I want to make sure to extend an invitation to join the waitlist for the brand new one-of-a-kind homeschool community, Made to Homeschool. Made to Homeschool has been crafted from day one by Christian homeschool content creators. Our content library, our workshops, and our community engagement will be influenced entirely by creators like me and many other amazing homeschool moms. I am so excited to be a part of the contributor team alongside homeschool mamas like Amy from Raising Arrows, Katie from Life in the Mundane, and she was a previous podcast guest, Wendy from Plan, Prep, Pray. I actually recorded an episode with Wendy several months ago, and it will be publishing soon. Abby from Rooted in Rest, and so many more. You can head to the link in the show notes to see the full list. The internet really is a noisy place. Made to Homeschool will be a peaceful place on the internet for homeschool moms like you to find friendship, support, and encouragement. Plus, the incredible library of exclusive resources we're putting together will provide tons of valuable content to help you in the day-to-day of homeschool life. Made to Homeschool opens to the public in a couple weeks, but we're already inviting some folks from the waitlist to early access. Head to humilityanddoxology.com/M2H to find out more and get on that waitlist so you don't miss a single announcement. That's humilityanddoxology.com/M2H. humilityanddoxology.com/M2H. Thanks for listening in on this week's Homeschool Conversation. For show notes and links to all the resources we discussed, head to humilityanddoxology.com/homeschool-conversations. And if these episodes are an encouragement to you, would you take a moment to leave a rating and review and to share with your friends? I am so thankful that you are here on this adventure with me. Let's repent of our constant striving, relish the joy of learning, and rest in the work of Christ on our behalf. Stand fast, my friends.